Hi, my friends. Welcome back. Back for another episode Behind the Walls with your girl, Anna B. Shout out to all of our new friends, newcomers, and subscribers. Thank you for all of the engagement, likes, and comments. If you are new here and have yet to subscribe, sit back, take a listen. If you enjoy the content, make sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss what Anna B has coming up next. And of course, shout out to everybody that has made a request for this video. Let's get into it. Women serving life in Missouri.
Missouri mom of 5 is believed to be on the run tonight. Dawn Wynn was charged and awaiting trial for the murder of her husband 10 months ago. In the meantime, she was supposed to be on house arrest. Well, now she is a fugitive. The U.S. Marshals are on the case, and her family thinks money she embezzled is helping fund her escape. Savannah Wynn remembers her dad as a loving man.
He loved us kids. He pretty much did everything he could for us and made sure that we had a good life. He loved my mom.
But late at night, November 16th, police were called to a rural road outside Anderson, Missouri. The police report reads that 49-year-old Dawn Wynn said her husband's gun accidentally went off, hitting her sleeping spouse in the head. A single gunshot to the head killed 51-year-old Harold Wynn. At the time of the shooting, Dawn, Harold, and their 2 youngest kids, ages 15 and 12, were sleeping in their fifth-wheel camper on their property. Wynn was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and armed criminal action, but was released out on bond and allowed to stay across state lines, 30 minutes away at her mom's home in Pea Ridge, Arkansas.
The conditions were that she had to stay at my grandma's house on house arrest, that she was to have no contact with us kids or any of my dad's family.
And Dawn Wynn was supposed to call in to police, but over the weekend she didn't, and now there's a warrant for her arrest. Savannah Wynn was among the family members who didn't want her mom out on bond in the first place. But Wynn was released as a result of a 2019 Missouri Supreme Court ruling on a Missouri board reform law, which allows certain Missouri criminals out on bond to make the system more fair to those who can't afford bail. Dawn Wynn reportedly left behind what are described as suicide notes, saying she was going to drown herself. But authorities and family think this is a cover for an alleged murderer now on the run. Lieutenant Hall with the Missouri Sheriff's Office, who handled the murder case, says, "I do believe she planned this and is on the run." Savannah now finds herself taking care of her own family and worried about her siblings and extended family.
Just worrying about them mainly and her trying something because we don't know what she's capable of or what her intentions are.
Family tells News Nation Dawn Wynn embezzled money before their father's murder. They say she embezzled money 3 separate times. The first instance dating back to 2016, when they say their mom was employed at the Gospel Light Baptist Church in Rogers, Arkansas. In all, they think she has about $600,000 hidden.
We're all kind of wondering if she doesn't have money stashed somewhere out on the property that we was living on that nobody knows about, and that she's going to go there first and get the money if she doesn't have a bank account or something that nobody else knows about.
And I think she pretty much is taking that money, running with it, and going to try to go start her own life somewhere else.
If Dawn were to see this broadcast, Lane has this message for her.
I mean, I think I speak for everyone when I say this, that we wish that she would just admit to it and give up the fight.
And worth noting tonight, Dawn Wynn has not been charged with embezzlement.
Dawn's children warned and tried with no luck to fight her release, pleading with the Missouri Supreme Court and calling into the victim's advocate, telling them she was a flight risk. When Dawn's release was ordered, they were all upset. Even the prosecutor didn't believe it would be a good idea to release her. Dawn and Harold were reportedly on the verge of a divorce after decades of jealousy, arguments, and verbal abuse from Dawn. Dawn's own daughter described her mother as controlling and toxic, constantly starting things. A citizen in Indiana recognized Dawn from the news coverage and reported her to local authorities. Indiana contacted the McDonald County Sheriff's Office to inform them they had Dawn in custody on October 24th, 2022, after she was reported missing in August. Harold Wynn was found dead in a fifth-wheel camper, lying partially on the right side of his back. His right arm was under his body, and his left arm was underneath the blanket and sheet of the bed. A .40 caliber Smith & Wesson semi-automatic pistol was found at Harold's head. The gun was facing an outward wall along with the second pillow where Dawn told investigators she slept. The prosecution said Dawn Wynn deliberated, planned, and executed the killing of her husband. Trial testimony showed that Dawn had increased the life insurance policy she had taken out on her husband up to $100,000, which went into effect on November 1st, 2021. That was 15 days before Mr. Harold was found deceased in his own bed. Testimony also showed Dawn owed a lot of people money. Dawn was convicted by a jury of 5 men and 7 women in August of 2024 for first-degree murder and armed criminal action. The 50-year-old mother of 5 and grandmother still did not take any responsibility for fatally shooting her husband of 25 years, even after she was found guilty. Instead, she said, "I didn't get a fair trial from the beginning. I didn't know. I woke up and found him," which disputes the prosecution's claim that she told law enforcement her husband died by suicide. Dawn was sentenced to the mandatory life without parole plus an additional 15 years on October 7th, 2024. The following day, she entered Missouri's Department of Corrections at the Women's Eastern Reception Diagnostic and Correctional Center, taking her first mugshot that you see here. Since then, she was moved to the Chillicothe Correctional Center where she took this mugshot. An appeal of her conviction was filed with the courts on October 15th, 2024. No decision has yet been made. My condolences are with the entire Wynn family. It is very sad that this woman did not consider how much her children loved their father, how much he loved them. Sad that Harold did not get to walk his daughter down the aisle, and his grandchildren will not get to know their grandfather personally. Very, very sad to see a family divided by one selfish decision. Rest in peace to Mr. Harold Wynn. 67-year-old Bertha Owens has been incarcerated since 1998 after she was found guilty for the 1996 murder of Frederick Huff. Fox 2 News covered Bertha's case since late 2021 in a series of Fox Files investigations. They interviewed both Bertha and her original attorney, who said evidence was withheld.
It really bothers me that there is not a lot of recourse in the justice system for people who have trials that aren't fair.
Turlington represented Bertha Owens in a 1998 murder case in which we interviewed Owens last November.
They offered me 20 years. And I said, well, I'm not going to take anything for something that I don't know nothing about.
It happened here at this South City apartment complex, and Turlington said there was a lot of interest in getting a conviction.
You have a victim who's an elderly white man who was hit over the head. He was in a wheelchair. He was disabled.
With no physical evidence, the trial hinged on one witness that we reported in previous Fox Files investigations has recanted her testimony. Even back in '98, the judge indicated in a sidebar the witness was not believable. The witness tells us today she was pressured to testify against Owen or face her own charges.
I'm not surprised that that happened, particularly since Nels Moss was involved.
Nels Moss is a former prosecutor who Turlington says she also had to fight just to get discovery. The victim had been robbed and hit on the head and then went to the hospital months before he died.
There was a lot of pushback from Nels Moss in terms of us getting, first of all, the complete autopsy report, and then a lot of pushback in order to get the full medical records from the hospital.
Charlie Snyder was a St. Louis County police officer for 20 years. Per an article in the St. Louis Magazine regarding Bertha's case, Mr. Snyder said he got tired of working for people with fewer principles and finer filters. That's when he started working as a private investigator. he began to dig into convictions that were questionable. He received a call from the Midwest Innocence Project with an offer to investigate Bertha's case pro bono. He took them up on the offer, which actually came at a time that would serve as a positive distraction for him from what was going on personally. Now, given the fact that the victim, Frederick Huff, was a helpless victim, this case received little media attention. The sole witness, Felicia, was supposed to have witnessed the attack on Mr. Huff. She was one of two hosts of a party house that was at the same apartment complex Mr. Huff lived. She said she stood at the storm door and watched as 4 people had beaten and robbed Frederick, who was confined to a wheelchair. 3 of the 4 were convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Felicia's boyfriend, Kenneth Daly, his friend, Willie Henderson, and Bertha. The 4th person was never charged. Now, this information was only given after Felicia was arrested for stealing and realized she'd be facing prison time. The clothes she and Kenny were wearing that night were taken into evidence. Blood was found on the neck of Kenny's shirt. Kenny, Willie, and Bertha were immediately arrested. Mind you, this was 7 weeks after Frederick was beaten. Now, Bertha admitted she was at the party house earlier in the day, but said she left with a friend who was actually the 4th person implicated in the beating and robbery of Mr. Huff. The 2 women were out partying before returning to the California Gardens apartment, and when they came back, that's when they seen the ambulance outside. 20 days later, Frederick died. The case became a homicide. Interviews were conducted in which the 911 caller actually picked out the 3 police had arrested, Kenny, Willie, and Bertha, as the 3 people she saw outside of Mr. Huff's apartment. But does that actually prove anything? Because she also said she seen Mr. Huff alive after seeing the 3. As Charlie dove into the pretrial documents, he learned it was only 2 months before trial, Bertha's attorney learned of medical evidence that indicated Mr. Huff was beginning to recover from the brain trauma he sustained during the attack when a bowel problem developed, which was not a direct result of the beating, but instead as a complication of treatment.
Buried in this 9-page autopsy from 1998 is a line that says colon perforation.
In this particular case, I think because it had that information in it, he had a reason not wanting us to see that. Basically, the hospital made a mistake and accidentally punctured his colon, and then he ultimately died because he became septic.
Turlington said she received the evidence so late it was difficult to find her own medical expert in time for trial. Owens would have been released years ago if this was not charged as murder first.
December the 9th, it would be 25 flat years. Yes, 25 flat years, yeah. It's a hard pill to swallow.
It's very problematic that people, like in Bertha's case, where the evidence is not particularly strong, they're subject to the same sentencing as somebody where they might have DNA and fingerprints and a confession.
There were no fingerprints. The DNA and the blood found on Kenny's shirt did not match back to Mr. Huff. The weapon used was most likely a brick due to the fragments found inside Mr. Huff's apartment that had blood on them. Felicia said Bertha used a knife and a statue, which neither were ever found. She also provided different versions of events in each of her statements to the police. All 3 defendants were tried together. And by the time the trial started, Bertha was painted as the mastermind. She received the heaviest sentence of all 3 defendants after the guilty verdicts were handed down, life plus 45 years. When the judge asked Bertha if she had anything to say in court, she said, "Yes, I do. I don't feel I had a fair trial. I'm not guilty of this. I wasn't there. I know nothing about this. There's no justice in this system at all." Bertha's record showed penalties for violating a stop sign and driving without a license, no felonies, no violent crimes, and no prison time. She didn't pretend to be law-abiding. She'd grown up in the Clinton Peabody housing project and said she'd been wild since age 15, trying to act grown. She dealt weed, she'd smoked crack since her early 30s, but she had no record of violence, nor did Willie. Only Kenny had a prior felony conviction. Charlie went to visit Bertha in prison after reviewing thousands of documents related to her case. For Charlie, in the first 5 minutes, he says, talking to somebody, he can usually hear the contradictions and the made up facts, but Bertha's story was consistent. And when she didn't know something, she said so. Now, after disappearing, Fox News actually tracked down the witness, Felicia. She didn't want to be on camera, but she agreed to have them record her voice.
Then the star witness disappeared for more than 15 years until we found her on Facebook. She agreed for me to record her voice if we did not identify her, and she told me she was so afraid of police and former prosecutor Nels Moss back in 1996, she just went along.
Because he kept saying, I got a witness that say they saw you standing outside. I wasn't standing on no side. He was saying that I needed to tell the story of what happened, and when I kept telling them that I really didn't know, they didn't want to believe me, so I just went along with it to make them leave me alone.
If prosecutors came to you today and asked you to tell the truth, would you cooperate?
Yeah.
If they asked you to sign an affidavit, you would sign it?
Yeah.
Felicia had actually signed an affidavit when private investigator Charlie visited her in prison back in 2007.
She recanted her whole story, and signed an affidavit of how she lied.
But the signed copy of the affidavit disappeared, ending Owens' chance for a court hearing.
And the jail had notarized it, when she signed it for that lawyer. That lawyer took it back and lost it. And that's the kind of thing we ran up against with getting help from outside.
With all this information brought to the forefront, it has not been enough to release Bertha, or Willie for that matter. St. Louis Prosecuting Attorney's Office has not pursued any action to re-examine Bertha's case, nor have they released the full case file. What are your thoughts? Do you think Bertha has been wrongfully convicted? Willie Henderson is still incarcerated and is currently at Southeast Correctional Center. Kenneth Daly died in prison. This is very troubling to me because if these folks are innocent, if Bertha's innocent, that means the real killer is still on the loose. And cases like this can truly make people lose hope in the justice system. Rest in peace to Mr. Frederick Huff. Similar to our last case, Patricia Patty Prewitt refused to take prosecutor's plea offer. Bertha was offered 20 years in the 90s, while Patty was offered a 7-year sentence in the 80s to plead guilty to lesser charges for the killing of her husband in 1984. The following year, she was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 50 years. She was 36. She would not have her first opportunity before a parole board until 2036, when she would be 86 years old. Patricia and her husband met in the 7th grade, dated in high school, later enrolling in the same college, and eventually marrying in 1968. They'd had 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys, and in 1976, the couple purchased a lumber yard in Holden, Missouri, which they ran together. On the stormy night of February 18, 1984, at about 3 a.m., Patricia showed up at her neighbor's house with her children, hysterically telling her neighbor she had been pulled out of her bed by an unknown male who had sexually assaulted her and harmed her husband, Bill, who was born William Edward Prewitt. 35-year-old Bill had been shot twice in his head while sleeping. Patricia told authorities after the intruder left, she checked on her children who were sleeping. She then retrieved a flashlight because the lights were not working. With the help of the flashlight, that's when she could tell there was blood on Bill. She then took the children outside, locked them inside a vehicle, went back to check on her husband, who was cold to the touch. She then took off for the neighbor's house. During their investigation, police discovered that the lights were powered down from the breaker box in the basement and the telephone lines had been cut. Bill was killed with his own .22 caliber rifle, which had been found in a lake on the property 3 days later. Patricia was then arrested and charged with Bill's murder. Making herself available for every interview that they requested, Patricia was questioned for hours. When asked during the questioning, she initially denied being unfaithful, but eventually admitted to 3 affairs that she had because of her husband becoming distant after she confided in him that she was a victim of a sexual assault in 1974 that was never reported to authorities. From the beginning of the investigation, police had focused on Patty, and it was clear that she was always considered the prime suspect. Many people who have looked into Patty's case, including her children, feel that credible leads were ignored and that key evidence was not collected. During her trial, which started in April of '85, the state said Patricia was the kind of woman who would kill her husband for lust and money. There was a footprint found in the lake near the murder weapon that an expert said resembled a pair of boots that she owned. The cuts on her throat were described as nothing more than superficial scratches. The state's case concentrated heavily on the fact that Patricia was unfaithful in her marriage. The prosecutor portrayed Patty as a bad mother, and the jury never heard the neighbor's account of seeing a suspicious vehicle. Police had also spoke to all three of the men Patricia had an affair with. All three gave statements that Patricia had at some point made statements indicating she wanted her husband dead, telling one of the men she wished her husband would be killed in a car accident and thought about killing Bill with a gun in their house. The jury believed the state's theory and found Patricia guilty. She was released on bond as she appealed her conviction. But the following year, her appeal was denied and she began her prison sentence, becoming the longest serving female prisoner in Missouri. Patricia has not only maintained her innocence, she's maintained the love and support of her children. Sadly, one of her sons took his life back in 1992. Throughout the years, she has gained many supporters across the world. She's applied for clemency 4 times. Bill's family has been vocal in their opposition, however. In a 1999 letter, State Senator Roseanne Bentley wrote to Patty that she could not support her request for clemency due to her own relationship with Bill's family, who, she said, were still grieving. Bentley ended her letter with the request that Patty not contact her again. In 2000, officials from Governor Mel Carnahan's office showed interest in Patty's case. Again, they received numerous complaints from Bill's family. And later that year, the governor died in a plane crash before a decision was reached. In 2018, a judge heard a request to test evidence gathered during Bill's murder investigation for DNA. That was denied. Patty's last clemency application was submitted in 2010. Since then, her father died in 2014, her sister died in 2017, her mother in 2018, and her brother the following year in 2019. Patty has been a model inmate throughout her years in prison. She's received multiple diplomas, served the state as a computer programmer. She's mentored many inmates entering prison, and she wrote a play that was performed at the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. On December 20th, 2024, Christmas came early for Patty, her children, and her many grandchildren. Before his departure, Governor Mike Parson commuted her sentence. She was released from prison and reunited with her family after 38 and a half years. Jane, Patty's oldest daughter, took to her Facebook page and wrote, "Yesterday I visited Mama Patty and had no idea it would be our last visit. A little over an hour into our visit, we were approached by an investigator who asked us to come with him. Then we were given the most amazing news ever. A few hours later, we walked out together and got in my truck. We were in absolute shock. We laughed and cried, made phone calls to her attorney and family all the way home. What a ride. More later. Thank you all." Could you imagine going for what you thought would be a regular visit with your mother, only to leave with your mother after 38 and a half years? I'm happy for Patty's family, her grandchildren, her children who were serving that time with her for all of those years. And I'm not here to judge if Miss Patty is innocent or guilty. I am interested in hearing your opinions. However, I still send condolences to the Prewitt family, to Bill's family, for their loss. I also send condolences to Patty's children who have endured 38 and a half years without their mother and 40 plus years without their father. Rest in peace to Mr. William Edward Prewitt. Rest in peace to their brother as well, who they lost in 1992, William Matthew Prewitt.